This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, it is 7:31 p.m. and I officially call to order this meeting of the Edgewood Borough Council for Monday, May the 3rd, 2021. Mr. Zohorchak, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Mr. Fuller.
Here.
Mrs. Gleba. Mr. Love.
Present.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Here.
Dr. Petrola. Ms. Yaney.
Here.
Mr. Wainwright. Okay, also let the record reflect that it looks like Mr. Barry is here. Is the mayor here?
Yes. Good evening.
Okay.
Rob, we're good here? We have a quorum?
I count 4.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Very good. So we are going to skip past the Pledge of Allegiance. Is there anybody joining us on the call tonight who has an item from the floor they'd like to discuss? If you do, we will give you 5 minutes to go. I'm not hearing anything.
I do have one comment to read to council that was submitted to me earlier today.
Real quick, there's nobody on the line who wants to weigh in?
I will.
Sounds like a no. Go ahead and do your.
Wait a few more seconds if I don't hear anything.
I mean, it's my comment getting read. So Rob, do you want to read it, or I don't have it in front of me?
Then I'll happily read it for you then if you don't have it.
All right, Rob, thank you.
Yes. This is addressed Mr. Zohorchak, Mayor Wilson, and members of the Borough Council. At the March 15th Borough Council meeting, numerous comments from Race Street residents concerning traffic conditions on our street were read. After the meeting, a flashing sign that displays drivers' speeds was temporarily placed on Race, the goal being to collect data on the extent of the speeding problem on the street. A subsequent report shared by Mr. Zohorchak revealed that the sign, when turned on, was highly effective at reducing excessive speeding. When the sign was collecting data but not displaying drivers' speeds, there was an average of 106.6 cars per day traveling at least 10 miles per hour over the posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour. When the sign's display was turned on, that average fell to 54 cars per day. This means that the sign effectively cut the number of violations per day in half. Extrapolating this reduction of 52.6 violations per day over the course of a year results in 19,199 fewer cars traveling at least 10 miles per hour over the speed limit per year. The sign was even more effective at reducing these dangerous speeds during the hours from midnight to 5 a.m., when I believe a lot of the damaging accidents occur. When the sign's display was turned off, there was an average of 11.5 violations per hour compared to just 4.8 when turned on, a 58.2% reduction. This implies that having the sign present and turned on would lead to 2,445 fewer violations in the middle of the night over the course of a year. That by itself could lead to a reduction in the number of damaging collisions that have become all too common to Race Street residents. In 2016, the sign, purchased from All Traffic Solutions, cost $4,960. I do not know the current price of the sign or one similar, but assuming a 2% increase per year, perhaps it is around $5,500 today. Examining the general fund budget on the borough's website reveals that total revenues are expected to equal just over $3.6 million. The borough could keep 99.85% of its revenue and reduce the number of cars traveling in excessive speeds on Race Street by over 19,000 per year. Surely that is worth doing. Please buy a new sign and place it on our street today. It makes a substantive impact and costs 0.15% of the borough's budget. If you won't pay for the full amount of the sign, would you at least match any funds raised privately? Finally, PennDOT's traffic calming handbook indicates that a traffic calming study can be requested on the grounds of excessive speeding or excessive cut-through traffic. I believe that the sign I'm requesting would address the speeding issue, but I still urge the borough to pay for such a study. It could lead to a substantial improvement in the quality of life for borough residents and perhaps finally solve the problem of cars not stopping at the Race and Greendale intersection. Thank you for your time and consideration. Todd Potts, 150 Race Street.
Quickly, before anybody weighs in, please just let the record reflect that Councilwoman Gleba has joined us. Mr. Potts, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think that was a beautiful reading of my comment, and I thank you.
Well, we appreciate such a concise ask. This sounds like an item to be advocated for in budget season, which is rapidly approaching. Do any other members of council have anything they'd like to add on this topic? Okay, there being none, Mr. Potts, do please make sure you follow up again with us, I'd say, at the end of summer with your requests. We appreciate the specificity of it, and it'll be considered by council as we go into budget season. Guys,
I'll put that on my planner. Thanks, guys.
Good stuff. Thank you, Mr. Potts. Is there anything else, Mr. Zohorecheck?
I did not receive any additional comments.
Okay, and there are no other callers in, so we're going to move right along. Today we have with us Mr. Bob Bellicose from Maher Drusel, who's going to talk with us about the relative advantages of establishing a capital fund or a capital improvement fund for the borough. So without any further ado, Mr. Bellicose.
Hi, thanks. Rob, are you going to start? You said.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Bob. Yeah, so essentially, I'm sorry, Ryan. Like, I'll talk a little bit, then Bob will talk a little bit, and we can kind of tag team this, answer any questions you guys might have. So basically, the purpose for me having Bob come tonight was that I had introduced the idea that the borough needs to establish a capital fund account or a capital fund if it wishes to be able to save long-term incrementally every year to complete some of these larger projects that we have and will need to inevitably do for the for the rest of time, really. Right now, the way our accounting system is structured, we're on a cash basis and we have one fund, which is just the general fund. So I have a capital budget, but I have no place to park the funds that we budget to save for a later date without the capital fund. So that money just goes back into the general fund. And when you start to look at our statement of revenues and expenditures and even our annual budget, you get some very skewed numbers because, like, for example, if we go to buy a vehicle, 2-3 years down the road, and we have been saving, let's say, $7,000 a year for X number of years, and we're only budgeted again in one given year to spend $7,000 towards completing the purchase, the amount of money required to buy that truck, then I have to write the check out of the general fund for the full amount of the vehicle, and it gets hit against that one line item and throws a huge expense on the expense side of the budget, and really throws everything out of whack. So it looks like we've spent more money than we actually have, but in reality, we've been setting aside for that for years. But that money has to come out of the general fund because it's the only place that we have to park the money. If we had a capital fund, it would just think of it as like your savings account. You're saving up to build that deck on your house, and every month you set aside $1,000, and at the end of the year you've got $12,000, and you can either transfer that money out of your savings account into your checking account and write a check, or somehow or other you dispose of that money, and presto changeo, there appears your deck. The capital fund would act in exactly that manner. It's a piggy bank for us to park money into that would be, it would be budgeted against future expenses. And I propose that obviously in the creation of this fund, and I'm going to, Mr. Barry and I were talking about this a little bit, and I'll have a question for Bob here in a second, but I'd propose that with the creation of this fund, we establish parameters on what it could be used for. Obviously it's a capital fund. It's meant to fund long-term improvements in the borough. It should not be used to fund, like, the Christmas parade. That would come from another area of revenue. And then, also with that, we would just have to decide, like, and I feel very strongly that you should have the ability to either transfer money out or preferably write checks directly from it, so that when those checks clear, they don't hit the general fund and also skew expenses out of the general fund. And so the question that I have for Bob, but I'll save this for later, is in the actual action of establishing that. And Bob, without putting you on the spot too much, I'm frankly not sure if you could give advice on this because you're our auditor, not our financial consultant. But there's a question of whether or not it should be established, the fund should be established via ordinance, via resolution, or just simply via a motion to establish a fund. The borough code is a little bit hazy on that. That's what the solicitor and I both realized. So I was curious to know if in other communities that you work in, if you have any insight into how that action has been set about, and if you have any recommendations to that, and if any of council at this time also has any questions too.
Yeah, I would think a resolution would be fine to establish the fund. We recommend having, sounds like you've started a capital improvement, policy plan for the fund, the purpose, who's going to make the decisions, what qualifies as a capital improvement, and just looking at that maybe 1 or 2 times a year, especially to get closer to budget time. I would say only go out maybe 1, 2, 3 years at the most, because as we see, things are always changing. So you don't want to get too far ahead of yourselves and have to make too much of an adjustment. Then as far as funding it, we see a couple ways. You can budget a set transfer amount at the start of the year, at the year end, that's made to the capital improvement fund, or some people use a percentage of their net income for the year in the general fund at year end and transfer that out, saying 5% of what we made for the year will go over to capital each year. It's just a preference, you guys. You could set a transfer amount and then adjust it at year end. If you do better in the general fund, it could be a fluent thing, but it doesn't have to be too formal of a process. The budget would be your indirect formality because you'd be looking at it through the budget process.
Yeah, I do know that some communities set a goal of, they strive to, at the end of the year, depending on revenues and expenditures, they strive to transfer maybe a portion of residual fund balance or a portion of income. That way, hey, a street fell in, we don't have the revenue this year. We spent all our money on fixing the street. We can't make those transfers this year. They're not on the hook to make that transfer. It's understandable that there's just simply not any more money left in the pot.
Yeah.
But then other communities, like right now, I've built in, we will transfer X amount of money out of the general fund into a capital fund for specific items.
Rob, I remember we had such a fund, but about 10 years ago with Warren, under Warren, we had 37 accounts. It was not so crazy. So we cleaned out all the accounts that had the little piddlies in that were just sitting around over the years. And we totally just dismantled that. But we figured if we do it again, we just have another one. So I don't think it's a big deal. It's been done before.
Yeah, I agree. It just wasn't kept up with over the years, but I do think if there's just one master capital fund account that is very, specifically geared towards, what it's supposed to fund, then I think it's a great idea. There was a lot of commingling of accounts years ago, and it just made things very messy. And I think it's a good idea.
As long as we're throwing comments in, the president of council, who's not with us tonight, made it clear that he wanted it to be known he's in support of the establishment of a capital reserve account.
Rob, would you write separate checks out of that? Would that be a completely different? You would not use the same checkbook to write checks out of the capital fund as the regular fund?
That's correct, George, but it would be only for expenses that are identified items on the corresponding capital budget.
Yeah, sort of like the sewer fund is now.
Precisely.
Would this be an interest-bearing fund, since it's something that really isn't going to be accessed frequently? I don't know if you can draw.
That is a very good question, Jennifer. I know that it really depends on, and maybe Bob could share his
Checks
side
on
on this. Oh, I know that some banking institutions are finicky about, like, paying interest on fully liquid government accounts, because all of our accounts have to be kept fully liquid at any given time. Like, for example, PNC does not pay us interest on our general fund, which is unfortunate, because we have a lot of money in there. I can certainly shop around and see if I can find an establishment that will, but there aren't a lot of options in that world from what I have seen. I don't know, Bob, have you seen any, and do you have any clients that earn interest on their special funds?
Yeah, you can do it. It's your money especially too. So what if you had like bond money in there, you can't earn interest more than what you're paying. So you need to get an
Sure.
arbitrage. But if it's your funding, you're able to earn interest. You just got to watch the bank isn't charging more in fees, like you said, than you're earning an interest.
That's the biggest problem that I seem to run into, is just the fees are just ridiculous.
But I could send you a list of some banks that people do use.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, is there any additional discussion, any extra comments, either from Rob or from Bob before we move on? Rob, should we be pursuant of this discussion, I don't know what, authorizing you, if there, as long as there are no objections, to explore this and come back to council at a later date with specific steps to be taken for the establishment of a capital reserve fund?
I think that sounds perfect. Yeah, it sounds like I'm not hearing any objections. So what I'd like to do is I'll spend some time researching what our avenues are. I think, and I'll come back to you all in a meeting or two with with our next steps, to include a resolution.
That sounds great. And unless there are any other questions, I'm going to say thank you very much to Mr. Bellicose and release him to his time. Anything else, Mr. Bellicose?
That's it on my end. If you guys are good, I'm good.
All good. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Have a great night.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Bob.
Hey guys, I'm going to call an audible here. Mr. Halley is with us from the Volunteer Fire Department. In the interest of saving our guests their evening, I'm going to let him go ahead. So, Mr. Halley, the floor is yours.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt real quick? Dr. Petrola has arrived too.
Okay, I'm here.
Yeah, thanks for letting me go, because if you haven't looked outside, we're going to get slammed here with the storm here any minute now. Getting really dark outside. Just to let you know that we have been extremely busy this past month. It's almost like being back to pre-COVID. Lots of calls, lots of medical calls, lots of the rapid intervention calls and fires in other towns that we've been going to, and lots of accidents on the Parkway. I talked to Rob last week about Community Day. So we understand that there's going to be a change for the time and the operations for Community Day. And sure enough, we'll be participating, but we're just waiting to see what the times are going to be, so we know how to plan our day. And obviously, we're going to be there for fireworks. So we'll be open for suggestions this year. If we have to go back to our chicken and rib dinners, pasta dinner, whatever, we're going to do what it takes. I mean, it's a community event. We have to be there. So that's what we're going to do.
The mayor dunk tank is the most important feature for me. As long as we have that, we'll be okay.
Are you going to go into dunk tank?
Ask the mayor.
The once and future mayor.
Hell no.
Actually, I think, to outrule it, I think everybody from council should go into dunk tank. So
I vote for turns.
We don't want to discriminate against anybody. So if it's all for one or one for nobody.
All right, Mr. Alley, let's get this conversation back on track. Is there any other report from the fire department for tonight's meeting?
No, everything's working out well. We had a small problem with the engine. Engine's working out really well. We had a problem with the starter switch that went bad, and that was fixed within 48 hours of us noticing the problem.
Well, that's good stuff. Those are the best kinds of problems, the ones that have already been solved. Mr. Halley, just make sure that you press on our gratitude and appreciation to the men and women of the fire department for all you guys do.
I will do, Ryan.
Nothing else. Have a safe trip home. Be safe out there, and thank you again.
All right, guys, have a good night. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night, sir. Okay, we're going to pop up to item 1 on our agenda, the authorization to pay bills. Mr. Fuller, if you please.
Thank you, Mr. Acting President. I move to authorize the payment of goods and services received by the borough for having been reviewed and approved by the General Government Committee from the general fund in the amount of $44,028.31.
Any comments on tonight's bill run?
No, there was a good one for Zambelli for the fireworks for Community Day. Couple vehicle checks and check for the Maple Avenue light and some money for the Oakview parking lot. That is really the majority of the expenditures, which were rather light.
Yeah, I was quite happy to see that the repair work was getting done on the Oakview parking lot retaining wall. Landslides can just be such an issue in this part of the country that anytime we put an investment into one of those things, it's a good thing. Does anybody from council have any questions about the bills?
Did we really make zero money for the whole month? Our revenue is zero in every category?
Sure. You'll register. Yeah.
Well, isn't that because it's the 3rd of May and this is the first working day in May and that's why everything was zero?
George, I couldn't have said it any better myself. I was going to say any income that we would have had just in the mechanics of the way the bill is run wouldn't have showed up. Yeah, because I know we got a very large transfer for real estate taxes coming into the borough. But yes, George, you're absolutely correct. The way that the calendar falls on that, when Janet ran the report on 4/30 for May 1, yeah, we hadn't recorded any revenue for May yet.
A good catch. Are there any other questions? There being none.
I'd like to second the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Love. Another good catch. Fortunately, we have a motion and a second, right? So now we're going to move to get the roll.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Dvorak.
Mr. Fuller.
Yes.
Mrs. Gleba.
Yes.
Mr. Love.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Aye.
Dr. Petrola.
Aye.
And Ms. Yaney.
Aye.
Okay, and with that, we move to committee action, the second reading of ordinance 1072. Mr. Love, you can do this one by title only, please.
Okay, real quick, since we did the first reading by title only as well, does that mean we can do this without ever actually reading the whole thing?
You know what? Let's be safe. Mr. Love, I authorize you now to read the entire ordinance as written. Thank you for your commitment.
You're welcome, Mr. Fuller. Borough of Edgewood, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, Ordinance 1072. An ordinance of the Borough of Edgewood, County of Allegheny, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, providing for the penalties related to the possession of a small amount of marijuana, personal use of marijuana, and the personal possession of marijuana paraphernalia. Whereas, under Pennsylvania's Controlled Substance, Drug, Device, and Cosmetic Act 35, PS 780-113, Section A, subheading 31, the possession of a small amount of marijuana up to 30 grams of marijuana or up to 8 grams of hashish, only for personal use. The possession of a small amount of marijuana with the intent to distribute it but not to sell it, or the distribution of a small amount of marijuana but not for sale is a misdemeanor punishable by up to 30 days of imprisonment, a $500 fine, or both. And whereas, under Pennsylvania's Controlled Substance, Drug, Device, and Cosmetic Act 35, paragraphs 780 through 113, Section A, subheading 132, the use of or possession with intent to use drug paraphernalia for the purpose of planting, propagating, cultivating, growing, harvesting, manufacturing, compounding, converting, producing, processing, preparing, testing, analyzing, packaging, repacking, storing, containing, concealing, injecting, ingesting, inhaling, or otherwise introducing into the human body a controlled substance in violation of this act is a misdemeanor punishable by up to 1 year of imprisonment, a $2,500 fine, or both. And whereas Edgewood Borough Council respects the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and fully supports the officers of the Edgewood Borough Police Department exercising their professional discretion when encountering possible violation of Pennsylvania's Controlled Substance, Drug, Device, and Cosmetic Act of 1972, and further supports officers making custodial arrests when they believe additional criminal offenses may have been committed. And whereas this council is desirous of a penalty for those found to be publicly using or in possession of marijuana or marijuana paraphernalia within the municipal boundaries of Edgewood Borough, and that penalty shall prove a meaningful deterrent to obvious criminal behavior, and that the punishment should not burden the criminal justice system. And whereas this council believes that any alternatives to the punishment defined in 35 paragraphs 780 to 113 and following should be applied uniformly to all offenders, establish standards, and contain escalating penalties for repeated violation of the public use or possession of small amounts of marijuana or marijuana paraphernalia. And whereas municipalities across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania have enacted similar local ordinances classifying the public personal use or possession of marijuana or marijuana paraphernalia a summary offense. Now, therefore, be it ordained and enacted by the Council of the Borough of Edgewood. Section 1, definitions. Marijuana or marijuana means all form of or varieties of the genus Cannabis sativa L, whether growing or not, as defined by Pennsylvania's Controlled Substance, Drug, Device, and Cosmetics Act as set forth at 35 PA, paragraphs 780 to 101 and following. Marijuana paraphernalia means any device, instrument, apparatus, or object intended to be used, or designed to be used for introducing marijuana into the human body or for storing, containing, concealing, or transporting marijuana. Personal possession means actual physical custody of, or the ability to exercise control over or have access to for the sole purpose of one's own personal use. This does not include possession with intent to deliver, distribute, transfer, or sell. Personal use means introducing marijuana into one's own body, which includes smoking, inhaling, exhaling, vaporizing, or burning any lighted cigar, cigarette, pipe, or other such device which contains marijuana or marijuana extracts. Public space means a street, park, sidewalk, or a vehicle in or upon any street, alley, park, or parking area, or any other place to which the public is invited. Small amount of marijuana means 30 grams or less of marijuana or 8 grams or less of hashish set forth in 35 PA, paragraphs 780 to 113, Section A, subheading 31. Section 2, possession. So long as marijuana shall be listed as a controlled substance in the Controlled Substance, Drug, Device, and Cosmetic Act, 1972, April 14th, PL 233, number 64, paragraphs 1 and following, 35, paragraphs 780 to 101 and following, no person shall be in possession of a small amount of marijuana as defined in said act. The following shall be a summary violation of this section: personal possession of a small amount of marijuana, personal use of a small amount of marijuana in any public space. So long as drug paraphernalia includes objects used in connection with marijuana possession or use in the Controlled Substance, Drug, Device, and Cosmetic Act, 1972, April 14th, PL 233, number 64, Section 1 and following, 35 PS, Sections 780 through 101 and following, no person shall be in possession of marijuana paraphernalia. The following shall be a summary violation of this section: personal possession of marijuana paraphernalia. Persons who are found in violation of Section 2, subheading paragraph A, or Section 2, paragraph B, shall be issued a non-traffic summary citation by the police or other authorized law enforcement officer. Alternatively, the officer can obtain the subject's name and address and later send a non-traffic summary citation by first-class mail. Section 3, penalties. Personal possession. The penalty for a violation of Section 2, paragraph A1A by an adult aged 18 plus shall be: the penalty for a first violation in 1 calendar year of personal possession of a small amount of marijuana shall be a fine of $25. The penalty for a second violation in 1 calendar year of personal possession of a small amount of marijuana shall be a fine of $50. The penalty for a third violation and any subsequent violations in 1 calendar year of personal possession of a small amount of marijuana shall be a fine of $100, or the court may, in its discretion, suspend the fine imposed under this section if the person found guilty agrees to and does in fact perform such community service as the court deems appropriate. Personal use of a small amount of marijuana in any public space. The penalty for a violation of Section 2, paragraphs A, 1b by an adult aged 18 plus shall be: the penalty for a first violation of 1 calendar year of personal use of a small amount of marijuana shall be a fine of $100. The penalty for a second violation in 1 calendar year of personal use of a small amount of marijuana shall be a fine of $150. Any subsequent events over second violation in a 1 calendar year span will fall outside of this ordinance and shall be charged in accordance with federal and Pennsylvania law. Personal possession of marijuana paraphernalia. The penalty for a violation of Section 2, paragraphs B1A by an adult aged 18 plus shall be: the penalty for a first violation in 1 calendar year of personal possession of marijuana paraphernalia shall be a fine of $25. The penalty for a second violation in 1 calendar year of personal possession of marijuana paraphernalia shall be a fine of $50. The penalty for a third violation and any subsequent violations in 1 calendar year of personal possession of marijuana paraphernalia shall be a fine of $100, or the court may, in its discretion, suspend the fine imposed under this section if the person found guilty agrees to and does in fact perform such community service as the court deems appropriate. Section 4. Enforcement. A non-traffic summary citation issued under this ordinance shall be enforced in accordance with the procedures established by the police department for enforcement of summary violations. To the extent possible, it is the intent that any revenue collected pursuant to this ordinance be allocated to Edgewood Youth Sports and Recreation. This chapter shall not be construed to supersede any existing Pennsylvania or federal law. Edgewood Borough police officers retain the authority to enforce any applicable laws, and it is Borough Council's intent that police officers may undertake custodial arrests where there is probable cause to believe that a criminal offense other than the simple possession of or use of a small amount of marijuana or possession of marijuana paraphernalia has been or is being committed. Section 5. Repealer. Any ordinance or any part of any ordinance in conflict herewith is repealed to the extent of such conflict. Section 6. Validity and severability. The provisions of this ordinance are severable, and if any of its provisions or any part of any provision or individual amendment enacted hereby shall be held unconstitutional or otherwise held to be invalid, the decision of the court shall not affect or impair any of the remaining provisions or amendments. It is hereby declared to be the intent of the Borough of Edgewood that this ordinance would have been enacted had such unconstitutional provisions or parts thereof not been included herein. Section 7. Effective date. This ordinance shall take effect and be in force immediately from and after its enactment as required by law, ordained and enacted this 3rd day of May, 2021.
Second. Although I missed part of that, could you do that again?
Yes, very well done, Mr. Love. Do we have to have a vote on that, Mr. Zahorecheck, or do we just move to a second reading? Oh, we have a vote. Okay. There being a second, Mr. Zahorecheck, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fuller.
Yes.
Mrs. Galiba.
No.
Mr. Love.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Aye.
Dr. Petrola.
Aye.
Ms. Yaney.
Hi.
Okay, the motion carries. Let's move to the 3rd reading of ordinance 1072 by title only. Mr. Love, now you've caught your breath, if you please.
Borough of Edgewood, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, Ordinance 1072, an ordinance of the Borough of Edgewood, County of Allegheny, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, providing for the penalties related to the possession of a small amount of marijuana, personal use of marijuana, and the personal possession of marijuana paraphernalia.
Very good, Mr. Love. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, there being a second, Mrs. Zohorecheck, call the roll, please.
Mr. Fuller,
Yes.
Mrs. Gleba,
No.
Mr. Love,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Aye.
Dr. Petrola,
Aye.
Ms. Janey.
Aye.
And with that, the motion carries.
This
Yes,
is
right?
the part, Ryan, where you have to ask, shall this ordinance pass?
There, I see. Okay. All right. Shall this ordinance pass? Mrs. Zohorecheck, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fuller,
Yes.
Mrs. Gleba,
No.
Mr. Love,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Aye.
Dr. Petrola, Dr. Petrola, well, this is interesting. Justin, you there?
Justin, is that you?
Hang on.
Justin, we can hear you.
I can't move on with the roll call.
Oh.
I just texted him. How about Lorenzo? Oh, he can't hear anything. Odd.
Anybody hear me?
Hey, there you are.
All right, sorry. I don't know what happened there.
That's all right.
What do I need to do?
We were calling the roll call for the last time on ordinance 1072. How do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. And Ms.
Sorry about
Janey.
that.
Aye.
That's all right.
That's everyone,
Maybe
right?
Lorenzo like threw the phone down the toilet or something.
All right, that being everyone, resolution 1072 passes. It is the ordinance of Edgewood. Moving along, resolution 2021-10 disabled parking space, Mr. Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Acting President. Resolution 2021-10. Approving creation of a disabled person parking space. Whereas the Borough of Edgewood recognizes the need for parking for its disabled residents, and whereas one disabled person parking space can be created at 861 East Hutchinson Avenue in the Borough of Edgewood to be marked and used for a handicap parking space, and whereas a disabled person parking space shall be permitted for 1 year, and upon the expiration of 1 year, to be submitted and reevaluated by the Borough of Edgewood for approval for an additional year, with the process to continue from year to year until the handicap need is removed or the premises are sold. And whereas in the event that there is no longer need for disabled person parking space, or in the event that the property has been sold, the placard and marking shall be removed. Adopted this third day of May 2021.
Second.
All right, there being a second, Mrs. Zohorecheck, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Fuller,
Yes.
Mrs. Gleba,
Yes.
Mr. Love,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Aye.
Dr. Petrola,
Aye.
and Ms. Janey.
Aye.
And the ayes have it. Moving right along, the water company report. Mr. Fuller, the floor is yours.
Thank you. At the board meeting for the Water Authority, there were several interesting things. One is the Kenmar Bridge is finally supposed to close the middle of this month. It should be closed from about May 15th to the end of June. when they are going to, I guess, ship the other bridge over or whatever they're going to do. And the water authority will make its, install its new water line then. The authority made an application to Penvest for $9.3 million to replace lead lines, and all $9.3 million was approved. I don't know how far the money will go in replacing the lines. They have at least 3,000 that they know of, and there could be a lot more that they don't know of, but at least it's a good start. Currently, there are 419 people on payment plans, with the number increasing. There's about $1.8 million outstanding from the authority since the shutoff moratorium went into effect. 40% of that is sewage, which the towns pay anyway. So they're hoping to recoup that money. And they turned down a right to know request. Somebody asked them where all their facilities were located. And they decided, in the interest of public safety, they would now tell this person that. And it reminded me of the Saturday Night Live skit where the Iraqi asked, "Where are your forces, and can we go there and count them?" And that's the extent of my, I don't know why somebody would want to know where all their facilities are, but they put in a right to know request for that.
Mr. Fuller, no one does the water company report quite like you. Is there anything else, sir? Any
That's
questions?
about it.
All right.
I
Good.
will add real quick while we're talking about water company stuff. If everyone probably noticed, there was another water line break on South Braddock Avenue, right near the H ramp. Restoration is, they did the sidewalk today on that, and they're set to do mill and paving restoration on Wednesday. So they'll have just the lane itself should be closed. I don't anticipate any lengthy stoppages other than a few hours to mill and repave that section. But that's where we are on that one.
And that was not the first break in that area either. I would imagine at some point they're going to have to go in there and replace that line, because that was 2 or 3 for that area.
That water line in particular is I think it's a 20-inch high pressure line that runs basically from their distribution center all the way to Rankin. And yeah, you're correct, George. The last one that blew out took out the entire intersection, and this was just literally a few feet up the street from it, the same line. From my understanding and talking to Lee Martz, the line follows the sidewalk up to about town center, and then of course takes a hard right back out into the middle of the street and actually goes under the planted island that separates the travel lanes on South Braddock right before you get, well, actually when you are in the borough of Swissvale. So that'll be an entertaining job if they replace it.
Yeah. Hopefully they've been talking to one of their contractors about maybe being able to line some of their high pressure lines. Whether or not that's feasible or not, their time will tell. But replacing the lines themselves is quite an extensive job.
And this line in particular, when you go in the other direction towards Regent Square, also either runs right underneath or right on top of the 9 Mile Run culvert. So that would be one that we would prefer to line if we don't have to open dig that, because it's 20 some feet deep too, right in the middle of South Braddock Avenue. Yeah. So hopefully we can line that.
Okay, well, there being nothing else, and Mr. Horchak, since you're already on a roll here, why don't we go right into the recreation report? Mr. Horchak?
I'm coming. I'm sorry. I was trying to pull up the email here with all the information. There we go. All right. Starting off, T-ball and softball registration ends May 15th. While it's unfortunately our platform doesn't allow us to compare like 2 years back in comparison to what registration looked like during the height of COVID, we've already surpassed the registration by far, and it looks like there is substantial interest in both sports this summer. I will throw out there that we could use another volunteer to help our head coach for T-ball. Soon, believe it or not, we'll be planning fall soccer league with registration opening up in July. Also, we'll have 2 movie nights this year, one each in June and one in July. Abby did a pretty creative thing this year with offering a viewer's choice movie. She did a little Google poll, and it looks like Moana is the winner, and that will be shown on July 25th. The other movie will be Raya and the Last Dragon, which is a animated Disney film that'll air on July 30th. Both of these movies are going to air on Friday nights to make it easier for families to attend, and we're going to, hopefully try to run down a food truck or some other type of vendor to supply some refreshments. Depending on attendance, we have money in the budget to do a third movie, and also how weather goes. It would be nice if we could run a third in September. And the runner-up in the Google poll was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So that could be the third and final one of the year in September. Steve mentioned a little bit about Community Day. I haven't really put that much effort, honestly, into what Community Day is going to look like. I've started to talk to the folks that plan our musicians and everything, and they have some bands. There are some musicians that have still practiced. The orchestra is completely up in the air. They were very honest in that. They haven't practiced at all. As a large group, they have no idea if they'll be able to before, and they're not sure. They have to talk to all of their members and get their thoughts on it. So that's still up in the air. Lastly, in the recreation report here, we did another plant sale. If you remember, we did one of these last year. Due to demand, there will be 2 days of plant sales and pickups at Koenig Field, either on May 8th or May 15th. Anyone who purchased plants will be getting an email on their pickup times. And that's all I have to report in the recreation department tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Zohorchak. Why don't you just roll right into the Planning Commission report?
The Planning Commission did not meet.
Very good. Mayor Wilson, the Council of Government report.
They did not meet.
Easy enough. Mr. Barry, the solicitor report.
Thank you, Mr. Acting President. I have no separate report this evening.
That's good stuff. Any need for a
executive session?
Exactly.
No.
Music to my ears. All right, that brings us to the borough manager's report. Mrs. Zohorchak.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Vice President, Mr. Acting President.
Hey.
Thank you. Thank you all for your attention with Mr. Bellicose this evening and your agreeance with the establishment of a capital fund. I look forward to heading down that road. A few things to talk about this evening. The paving program is, we have the advertisement ready. We will have a award to make at the first meeting of June. We'll have bids back by then, and we'll have an idea of what the program will look like, and we'll have a motion to award to the lowest responsible bidder at the first June meeting. Ryan mentioned there was some funds expended for the construction of the retaining wall in the Oakview parking lot. Construction is to formally commence on May 10th, on Monday, May 10th. So 1 week from now, we had our pre-construction meeting with representatives of JG Construction and Garvin Bauer Bietko, our consulting engineer on the project. They're very confident that this project can be completed by approximately the 3rd week of June. So we'd be looking at about a 6 to 7 week turnaround, obviously weather dependent, but not a very complicated project, just a very tight space to operate in. We did obtain a construction easement from the neighboring property owner as we have to track some machinery onto his property. Pre and post construction photos will be taken and everything will be restored in accordance to those photos. There will be, we've already closed the lot. Today was the first day because we actually thought maybe the contractor could mobilize and start today, but given the weather that he's going to have for the next week, it made sense just to hold off on that. But the lot has been closed to parking and pedestrians. All of the people who park in that lot have been given on-street parking passes for their troubles. And there is the possibility we may have to restrict some parking very near, like 1 or 2 spaces, very near the entrance to the lot, just to accommodate the delivery of steel and concrete when we are constructing the pylons for the retaining wall. Other than that, I hope and anticipate there won't be any greater disturbance to the folks on that street. So yeah, like I said, that'll start next week. We had our turn on, call it the turn on, even though the signal's been in operation since like before January. We had our turn on inspection with PennDOT for the Maple Avenue traffic signal. Overall, the representative from PennDOT was satisfied, with the one exception that even though PennDOT approved the drawing as submitted almost 2 years ago, PennDOT would now like to see the addition of one more traffic signal on the mast arm that would face and signal vehicles that are traveling on Swissvale Avenue away from the borough in the direction of Swissvale. So we are in the middle, we're about a week into the 30-day monitoring of the signal. Our traffic signal installer was able to locate a signal head that is actually only about 2 years old and was never really put into service. He happens to have it laying around. It will match the signals that are there. He will give it to us at a very generous price of about $400. The only thing that we will have to pay him for is his time to go out into the middle of traffic and install the extra signal that PennDOT wants us to put up. Now, of course, PennDOT is not offering any more money for this, even though they approved the project as designed. But I'm expecting.
Won't Justin pay for that?
We'll take that out of his compensation. Yeah. Yeah. So he fully expects that it should take him approximately 1 day to possibly a day and a few hours to make the necessary wiring and adjustments and installation of all that. He bills at $80 an hour. So you can do the math pretty quickly, $80, 8 to 10 hours, there's your extra cost. You may have to have a second truck out there for a period of time to help assist with installing the second traffic signal or the extra traffic signal. So there may be, at the end of the day, you might have like $2,000 extra in this that PennDOT wants us to put the signal on, which unfortunately we have to do because they are paying for bulk of the project. Otherwise, we could say no. But since it's their project and their money, we have to do what they say, even though they approved a drawing without the signal. Terribly frustrating. So that's the good and bad bit of news on that. Otherwise, in 20 days, we'll be done with this.
That signal, where is it? I mean, there's only 2 lanes of traffic there, right?
Uh-huh.
Checking.
So the technical details. According to our PennDOT representative, PennDOT now wants you to install a 4-pack signal light, a 4-signal light when you have a left turn situation like we have onto Maple. So as you all know, there's the green light, yellow arrow, and red signal. The problem is when the yellow arrow activates to tell people to yield, but they can still turn left onto Maple, the green light on that signal turns off. And there has to be a second green light. There have to be 2 green lights. If you have 2 signals in every other direction, you have to have 2 signals in the oncoming direction as well at all times. So the additional signal will literally be just for the placement of another green light on that side of the pole And yeah, the PennDOT won't allow you to install the 5-pack, I call them the Christmas tree. It's the red light at the top and then the parallel lights that run side by side. You can't use those anymore because, I don't know, PennDOT said you can't use them anymore. If we use that 5-pack, we could have the green light and the yellow arrow and it wouldn't be a problem, but you can't use them. And around and around and around we go. It's called job security. So yeah, we have to install another signal on a traffic signal that they approved as designed like this 2 years ago, but no one bothered to catch that until we stood there and looked at it. So moving on, unless anyone else has any other questions. Where am I? The pivoting very much, but in the same location, the Boy Scout, Eagle Scout gazebo project. Some of you may have noticed there's now a hole in the middle of Memorial Park. It's going to be the home of the future foundation of the gazebo that the Boy Scouts will be constructing on the weekend of May 15th. The gazebo is set to be delivered on the 14th to the Public Works Yard, and they're going to start constructing it on the 15th. Concrete will be poured Wednesday, weather permitting. So very exciting to see that project finally come to a head. There have been lots of volunteer hours and other discussions about that, but it will be a very nice project when it is all finished. So yes, thank you for your support and approval for that. And I'm sure that there will be an Eddie Lockman, and probably should do a Mrs. Noreen Lockman Day for the efforts of his mother that she has put in on this project as well when all is said and done. Last two items. I don't know if I can remember if I told you the last time or not. We took delivery of the new DPW pickup truck. All is well with that. We just have to wait to get it outfitted, but they can use it in the meantime until we can get in line at the outfitter. And lastly, unfortunate news, the state did not choose to fund the DCNR grant application that we had in for the Laurel Tot Lot playground reconstruction. We had applied for a grant of approximately, I believe it was $160,000 with about a $30,000 match, and we were declined funding on that one. But I did authorize the engineer, since all the paperwork is already done. We just literally have to change the dates on everything, and I'll have to have a new authorizing resolution from you all. We can go ahead. The submission period runs through the end of May again for funding next year. So I said, yes, go ahead and prepare everything to resubmit again for next year. Maybe some of that federal money will replenish DCNR's coffers in the meantime. So that was disappointing to hear, but frankly not surprising. Everything from the state has been put on hold or is canceled altogether. And that actually concludes my manager's report for this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zahorchek. Any other questions? Okay, any new business tonight?
I would like to call for a public safety meeting on Wednesday at 6:30.
Yeah, sounds pretty good. I'll be there. Who's it, Mr. Mayor? Can you make that time?
Yes, absolutely.
And who's our last member on that committee, George?
Justin, Dr. Petrola.
Is that good for you, Dr. Petrola?
I should be good. I should be good.
All right, then that will be this Wednesday at 6:30. Any other new business?
That is for interviewing a part-time police candidate.
Very good. New business.
When are we going to have meetings again in person?
There is some
Good
guidance
question.
on that. Yeah, I believe there is some guidance on that. Mrs. Zahorchek, when do we have any idea when we'll be able to have meetings in person again?
Whenever you all feel comfortable meeting again.
Oh, is that something that we can resolve in an email chain, or is that something that we have to do in a public meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be frank with you, I've sort of tuned out the guidance on, it seems like every day the guidance is changing on how we should conduct our lives. I'll be very frank in that. I will happily research the guidance on how to conduct ourselves in person meetings and share that in an email with the group. And I suppose that if the will of council is there, we could, the only thing I will have to do is obviously, because I advertised at the beginning of this year, or I'm sorry, last year for the meetings this year, that we would be meeting virtually until further notice. So I would just need enough time to submit another ad, which isn't all that much time at all. But just to make sure that we now cover all our bases and submit another ad that says we're going to meet back in person again at the Borough Building.
Let's just
That'll
look
give
into
us, like,
whatever
3
guidance
days.
exists about it. We'll give our members an opportunity to consider the matter themselves. Maybe we can chime in together over an email and decide as a group which way we want to go. Because it might not be that we just have, either all virtual or all in person. We might have other options. Who knows? Let's explore what's out there. Is that good for you, Mr. Mayor? We'll work on it.
Sounds good.
All righty. Any other new business? Mr. Fuller, you have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a second? There being a second? There being a second, let's just do a voice vote on this one. All in favor, aye?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? That'll do it. Thanks for coming out, guys. See you next time.
All right, Brian.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thank
Hey.
you.
Hey, Tara,
Yes, sir.